Hey everyone, welcome to the latest Gamasutra Editorial Forum. It's titled The Non-Sugarcoated Actual Cost of Making a Video Game. Very provocative. It is a talk from Mike Rose, a very provocative person in his own right. He's founder of the publisher No More Robots. This talk is made possible by our sponsor friends at xola. I'm Chris Graft, publisher at Gamasutra, and I'll be lurking around here as a moderator. But first, we have just a few announcements before we begin. This forum is designed to be interactive. The dock of widgets at the bottom of your screen will allow you to learn about today's speakers, download resources, share this webcast via social media, and participate in the Q&A session that takes place at the end of this presentation. The slides will advance automatically throughout the event. You may also download a copy of the slides via the resources widget. We'll start with our featured speaker, Mike, followed by a short message from our sponsor. And after that, there'll be a live Q&A with our speakers. So think about stuff you want to ask these folks. So toward the end of the forum, we'll ask you to complete a survey. It's found on the right-hand side of your screen. So please take a minute to fill this out before leaving us today, so we knew if we were doing a good job or a terrible job. So lastly, if you are experiencing any technical problems, just click the help widget found at the bottom of the screen or type your issue into the Q&A area, and we'll be glad to offer one-on-one personal assistance. So, our speakers, onto our featured session, the non-sugar-coated actual cost of making a video game from Mike Rose. So, Mike and I used to work together on Gamasutra before he abandoned me to head off to the publishing world, where he ended up founding No More Robots, known for publishing excellent games like Hypnospace Outlawed, Descenders, Yes, Your Grace, and the upcoming Let's Build a Zoo, which looks fantastic. After Mike, we'll hear from Anthony Mendoza, Director of Business Development at xola, who will talk about how you can expand the global reach of your mobile or PC game. And with that, I'll pass it on over to the absolutely savory Mike Rose. Thanks, Mike.
Wow. What an intro. Thank you for that. Savory. I've never been described as savory before. That's quite exciting. Thank you, Chris. That was very lovely. Yes, hello, everyone. I am, as mentioned multiple times, Mike Rose. I am very British, I am very loud, and I am here to destroy your hopes and dreams. Well, I hope I'm not going to destroy them too much. This talk, I imagine, is going to, for a lot of people watching it, feel hard. It's going to probably feel quite harsh. I hope that that's not the takeaway in the end. I hope the takeaway is more that you kind of see what I have to say, and you sort of take it as advice and take it as a path that you can kind of mold for yourself, rather than I am doomed, which some people may take it as. The main reason that I wanted to give a talk like this is because, as Chris mentioned, I run a publishing label, and we get many people coming to us with games and with their plans and with how long it's going to take, how much money they need, how they're going to do this, how they're going to do that. And a lot of the time, the plans are difficult, to say the least. They're perhaps, for whatever reason, they are maybe not completely doable. Or even if that person gets to the end of this journey, they're not exactly going to come out of the other end with a game that's going to make them money. So anyway, yeah, let's kind of get into it. So yeah, as I mentioned, it's very likely, whether you're making your first game or even not your first game, you're kind of a game or two in, it's likely you have many plans. You think those plans are great. Unfortunately, in my experience, they are probably not. So a quick blast about myself so that you can really know who to hate here. I have been working in video games for a very long time. I used to, as Chris mentioned, write about video games many moons ago. It was through writing about games that I started to become interested in the business side of how games sell. Started to talk to a lot of developers, started to realize what it was that developers needed to make their games sell. And yeah, several years ago now, actually, I started this publishing label, No More Robots. I hoped it would go quite well. I would argue it kind of has. I would hope that you've heard at least of one of our games. I do pretend to work a lot and actually just shout a lot on Twitter, which is probably another way you might know me. But in general, I like to think over the last several years at No More Robots, we've kind of showed that we at least slightly know what we're talking about. So maybe it's worth maybe semi-listening to me. So when I talk about all of the reasons why I think that maybe a lot of developers need to have a long, hard think about their plans, a lot of the time when people are coming up with, how much money they need, how many people are going to work on it, what kind of game they're going to make, how long they're going to spend on it, a lot of it, as harsh as it sounds, I want to say the word naive will come up a lot in my head. And I mean that in as nice a way as possible. A lot of people, especially the first time you're making a game, it's just not possible to know all of the reasons why things are not going to go exactly as you hoped, or why perhaps your plans, you kind of believe that your plans are sound when actually all of the numbers, all the bad numbers are going to be higher and all the good numbers are going to be lower, and you're kind of not going to get there. So I'm going to go through a lot of these things that are on the screen right now, but I'm sure you've heard a lot of these kind of things before. People, especially, again, on first games, over-scoping a lot, not thinking about what's going to happen once the game's out. A lot of people think, it's launch day, I'm rich, and that's not exactly how it works. So there's a lot of reasons why it's probably a lot less likely that your first game is going to be this wild success you hope it will. But maybe we can explore that now. So I have this formula that I like to kind of throw around in my head and use behind the scenes a lot. Now, this is an extremely simplified version of it, but I think it's still useful to just kind of use in a basic way to get an idea of the kind of things I'm going to be talking about. So let me just talk you through this. This is a very simple, am I going to be making money on this game that I'm making formula. You can see that simply all I do is take pretty much how much money it is going to be costing to make your game, dividing it by how much money each copy is going to be, and making sure that that number that you come out with is less than how many units you might actually sell in your first month. Because the truth is, if that number is not smaller and it's going to take longer to recoup the amount that you're actually going to make, how are you going to survive after month one? So let me explain this with numbers, because it might be a little bit easier to understand this with actual numbers. So what I've taken here is I had to Google what a sort of average salary in the US is, and in different places it might kind of be wildly all over the place. But I've taken about $30,000 here as a livable average salary in some places of the US. I imagine in some places that is not livable. I've assumed here that you've got 3 of you making the game full-time together, and I've assumed that you are going to take 2 years to make it, as is what I see a lot of developers decide is the amount of arbitrary time they're going to take. I've then added what, quite frankly, I believe is a small amount, is on the low side for additional costs. Additional here being things like localization, and contingency being pretty much stuff that you've forgotten about and your game being late. As I say, this is probably on the low side, really. There's probably a lot more to add on to that. But just for the sake of simplicity, that's how I'm doing it. And then below, you'll see that I've divided it by $8. What I mean by this is that if you are charging $20 for your game, the amount that you are actually going to make roughly per copy, once all is said and done, once the platforms have taken their cut, once there's been refunds, sales tax, VAT in certain countries, etc., a lot of the time, and stuff like currency conversion as well, because of course, just because it's $20 in the US means it's probably about $8 in China. So for every sale in China, it's a lot less than $20. All of those boring things that go into working out that roughly you're probably making about $8 a copy on a $20 game. You can see here that with this extremely simple version of the formula, we end up with it being that you need to sell about 25,000 units with that setup to kind of make your money back. And the truth is, though, unfortunately, most games do not sell 25,000 units in the first month. So at that point, you got to ask yourself, well, what happens at the end of that first month then? Am I working with a publisher? Are they recouping that? Am I going to see any money? If I'm not going to see any money, then what am I doing at the end of month one? Does my studio just have no money, and can we not continue anymore? This is the kind of hard question you really need to ask yourself. This is what I would suggest, again, using my incredibly simple formula, is the kinds of figures that are going to come out in terms of costs based on the number of people working on the team versus how long you are going to be working on it. Again, it's very simplified, but the idea, rather than taking what I've got here as kind of gospel, is to use this as a guide for your specific idea. So you can see my assumptions when I've built this down the left here. A lot of the things I already mentioned about the average salary and the cost, etc. And then you'll see down the right-hand side, I have put in place what I deem to be my personal thresholds on whether I think it's going to be easy or difficult to make your money back based on how much you've actually spent in the first place. As you'd imagine, the green means, hey, you've got a chance here, and the red means perhaps not. Now, you'll see from this that it's quite a scary looking thing, because most of it is not green. And, you know, there's different ways to take that. There's ways that you can attempt to kind of shift it to kind of your strategy, and we'll talk a little bit about that soon. I feel like the main takeaway here, especially for people working on their first game, is to look at this and think, should I be being more realistic than I currently am? If there's 4 of us and we're thinking about spending 2 years, is this horrible British man right here in saying that it's going to end up costing about $250,000 and that we are not going to make that money back and it's going to cause problems for us? That's really the point of this here, for me to try to raise that question in your head about whether your plans are viable, and if they're not, trying then to work out what you could do about that. Because the thing about this as well is that what I've done here does not really take into account post-launch as well. As I've mentioned just before, a thing that a lot of studios end up doing is they plan for the development of their games. So they'll go to a publisher, they'll go to an investor, however it is that they get their money, and they will say, right, we need this much, and that's going to take us up to June, and the game's going to come out in June. But the problem is that, say you do an amazing job and you come out exactly when you're meant to, you're not going to see money in June. That's the problem, and I think that's the thing that a lot of studios don't, it's not even realizing it, it's just they don't think about it. In June, you're not seeing that money. You won't be seeing it in July either. Partially because platforms pay out on a delay. You know, depending on the different platforms, it can be months before you be paid. But also because if you're working with a partner, a publisher or an investor, are they recouping at 100% first before you start getting paid? If they're not, and they're recouping at 80%, what are you getting? in the first month? How much do you need to survive X number of months? These are things you need to be thinking about. And realistically, you know, the truth is that most games are just not ready at the time they're meant to be. You can see here, these are the 6 currently released No More Robots games. I've not put the titles on them because it's not super fair to the developers we work with. But you can see here, some of them nearly on time, some of them absolutely not on time, and that's not, you know, there's a variety of reasons for that. Sometimes it just takes longer than you were hoping. Other times you get partway through development and you realize this thing isn't fun, and we need to alter it to try to kind of get it to where we want it to be. There's so many reasons, but if you don't think about this, how many times have you seen studios where they've been working on a game for a year and a half, 2 years, and all of a sudden they run out of money, and then they start desperately trying to find money, and the most amazing looking games never get finished because they didn't take this kind of thing into account. So realistically, a lot of the time I will tell studios to think about what happens if they need 6 months of burn rate when you know, on top of the money they already need. And as you can see, I've kind of altered the table to fit that, and it looks even more grim. Again, when I show you this, I'm not doing it in a so you probably shouldn't ever bother making video games. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's more that you just really need to be thinking about this stuff. As well, when I talk about this, realistically, I'm only really talking about one platform. I'm talking about you putting the game out on, if it's a PC game, PC. If it's mobile, it's a mobile game. If you want to do ports as well, if you want your PC game to be on a bunch of consoles, etc., are you doing that? Are you sim shipping? Are you bringing it to consoles later? Both have their ups and downs, but both of them cost money. And depending on your game, the complexity of the game, what engine you're running in, a whole host of things. Ports can be relatively not too expensive, or they can cost a ridiculous amount. Who's paying for that? Is your partner paying for that? Your publishing partner, are they recouping that? Because if they are, when are you ever making money? You know, how is your studio going to survive past game 1 if you owe a partner all of this money? Again, these are just questions you need to be asking yourself. So okay, I've made you feel terrible now. I apologize for that. It's in my British nature. So I'm going to try to now talk about ways that you can shift it so that it's not so horrible. And you'll already be, I'm sure some of you watching this, you'll already be very much aware of these. You'll already, if anything, been shouting at the screen, yeah, but I'm doing this and that, and so that's why I'm not doomed, and that's great. But it's still good to go through all of the ways that this can kind of be shifted in your favor. The main one for me, especially if this is your first game, if it's not, and you've already done this whole thing, then fair enough. But especially if it's your first game, the number one thing that I see with studios is them spending too long making games. I've genuinely had email back and forth with developers who have pitched us games, and they've said, like, they've shown us this pitch, the game looks lovely, and then they've said, and this is going to take us 4 years. And I've said to them, how how can you do this? Because in 4 years, you don't even know where you guys are going to be. You don't know what video games are going to be selling. You don't know what platforms are going to be available in 4 years. The whole of video games could have changed in 4 years' time. We might just be doing subscription models like Game Pass. You don't know what video games are going to be looking like, which genres are going to be selling, which platforms are going to be. There's so many unknowns the more time you add into it. And there's so much more risk that comes with it. And the response I always get back so many times is people telling me that they genuinely believe that time spent making a game equals a higher quality game equals they will make more money. Now, I can get with the idea that the amount of time that you spend on it may increase the quality. It may do. It may also just increase the amount of faffing you do. The amount you just keep tweaking things, the amount you keep going back to your work and redoing it over and over again. how many times have I seen developers doing that? But the idea that the longer you spend on a game, the more money it will make is just a complete fallacy. When I go to look at a game on any store, if any player goes to look at any game on the store, they have no idea how long you spent on that game. They have no idea. You could have spent 3 years, you could have spent a year, and they will look at that game like that's not information that's important to them. Does the game look good? Yes, then maybe I'll consider buying it. The number of times I've seen studios falter because for some reason they've got into their heads that they need to spend years on a game to make a good game is amazing, especially for first-time studios as well. If you're a first-time studio, my genuine thoughts to you are start small. If you build something small first, it means that you're reducing the risk because it automatically then costs less of your time and your money. So if it maybe doesn't go as well as you were hoping, which happens to most studios, unfortunately, it's not as much of a blow for you. You can kind of come back swinging potentially after it. You also can use this first game to learn so many parts that you might not know before. You can learn along the way. There's so many places in game development to slip up. I think we all know this. And by building something smaller first before you go and make your big game, it can really mean that you can learn a lot about how it works, how platforms work, how all the backends work, how launching a game works, what you do post-launch, etc. This is one of the main things that I go and tell studios so often, and even studios who have been around. We work with some studios now. We've got a couple of sequels at No More Robots underway, and when we were first talking to the studios making the sequels, I essentially went, these are people I've already worked with on other on prior games, and I've said to them, I'm really excited about the game. These plans look great. Do you need to spend this long? Can we chop this down? And when we've really looked at their plans, we've realized, yes, we absolutely can. And it's not going to hurt the game in any way. It's just going to mean that the game is made sooner. There's also a lot of situations where I think development time on games can be reduced and shifted, and a lot of the features you are hoping to do are shifted post-launch. We've got this with a game right now. I don't know if James is watching at the moment, but we've got this game which Chris mentioned earlier, Let's Build a Zoo. Because of the way that Let's Build a Zoo is it's a zoo management game, there's so many features in this game which it would be lovely to have for launch. And if you wanted to put everything in for launch, this game could be developed literally forever. The truth is that at some point, you got to go to yourself, let's shift some of this to post-launch. Let's put some of this out later. Because if anything, that would be a great way to continue to bolster the community around a game by taking some of that stuff we want to put in for launch and putting it in afterwards. So yeah, there's plenty of ways, I think, to reduce risk in that regard that I think probably a lot of studios could probably do with thinking about. The other thing, which I think a lot of studios already do, in fairness, but might be something for your studio to think of, is the idea that in a studio, from the very first game, everyone has to be full-time. I see a lot of teams where they struggle a little bit because there might be one or two people who are seemingly hard at work all the time, especially the programmers. And then there's potentially people on the team who are bottlenecked and waiting for these things to be built so that they can start to kind of skin them and do all of their magic to them. What I've got on the screen here is actually a game that we have underway at the moment, where when we were planning for this game, we wanted the development time to be 12 months. And we realized very early on that a really kind of good way to do this would be for the programmer to pretty much build the entire base of the game in 6 months. And then for that final 6 months, while that programmer is then kind of shaping the game into a tight product, with then bringing the people in who can then skin the game and make it look beautiful. It's this kind of thing, and you can see by doing that, we were able to kind of reduce the cost of how much this thing's going to cost. It's that kind of thing that, again, maybe you've already thought about this, maybe you're already doing this, but for some people, it might be quite useful to kind of keep in mind. Of course, there's one of the other big ways as well. We talked about sort of publishers and investors, etc., paying for a game, and a lot of people, I guess, will build a game in their spare time, and it's a whole other kettle of fish where we have a game like that at the moment, actually, where two guys are making it in their spare time, and that brings all of its own problems, right? I'm sure a lot of you watching this are already aware of that. Doing a full-time job in the day and then coming home and feeling like, right, now I've got to work on this thing, can be quite daunting. For a while now, these kind of grants and funds, especially the kinds that I've listed at the bottom here, we are quite lucky in that we have quite a lot of them going on in the UK. But as far as I understand, there's quite a few of them around the world as well, including in the US. They can be really useful. You get some where the kind of the grants, they want to recoup it like a publisher would, but maybe not have so much of what I guess some people see as a bit of a stranglehold on the game and the creativity of the game, which perhaps publishers can bring. Some of them don't want to recoup. And it's just a grant and go away and do it. A lot of the time, these grants won't fund the entire game. I'm sure you're aware. You see grants being anywhere between sort of $5,000 to about 50 grand. But if you look at those numbers I was showing earlier in the table, and you reduce each of those numbers by 25 grand, say if you manage to get that much of a grant, that could be a massive amount. That could be a big deal. That can take you, from the danger threshold into the perhaps this will work threshold. So yeah, there's plenty of ways to do this, and it's helped, especially in the UK. I'm aware of a lot of people who this kind of thing has helped out. So let's just kind of finish this off by putting this all together. What I wanted to give you was, through all of this sort of doom and gloom, if you were like, okay, then, well, how am I going to do this? This is the kind of thing that arguably the average team might be aiming for and can actually work. So if you had 3 people, 2 of them are full-time, 1 of them's part-time, and you work for about 18 months, we're talking 15 months of work to make the game, plus an extra 3 months of contingency, aka lateness, throwing in some localization and additional costs that kind of come out of the woodwork. You are at the point then where if a publisher that you've signed with, if you've got them to agree to recoup at an 80% rate, you could actually do all right. You won't, don't get me wrong, you're not going to be millionaires, but you could actually survive your first game and end up doing quite decently out of it, especially if you and the publisher continue to continue to support the game. And then, yeah, throw the ports in afterwards. We do a lot of ports post-launch rather than SimShip, partially because of the stress of it as well, not just because of the money, but because of the stress. So anyway, if you're looking at this and thinking, that's roughly what we've been thinking, perhaps you're on the right lines. Might be nice to read this. Before I finish, I just wanted to mention as well, because I've not really mentioned it. I've talked about money this whole time. I can only apologize. There is this thing that comes up with a lot of developers. I see it with most people, including myself. This is also talking about how I feel after we've launched a game. A lot of the time, a part of the contingency that some developers don't take into account is how stressed out and burnt out you can get in the follow-up and post-launch. A lot of developers are like, right, well, after the launch, we'll be doing this, that, and the other, and we'll smash another game out, and it'll be easy. Maybe that will be for you, and I envy you if that is a description of you. Unfortunately for most people, it's not. Unfortunately for most people, they put a game out, and the months that follow can be difficult. And for some people, it can be the years that follow, quite frankly. You probably know better than anyone how you will cope with a game launch. Or maybe you've already launched a game and you know. This kind of thing, it's difficult to take into account when it comes to contingency, etc. But it's just something to keep in mind. It would be remiss of me to talk about all of this and not mention this, because it can become a problem. And there's obviously plenty of people and support places you can talk to about this kind of thing. But it's certainly worth just keeping in mind, because you don't want to get to your game launch and not have thought about this kind of thing, and all of a sudden it overwhelms you. Definitely keep this in mind and think about how you can potentially get support if you need it, I would say. Anyway, thank you very much. Again, through all of this, I just want to say, I know this has been doomy. Is doomy a word? I don't know. I know this has been doomy, but I also hope that something that you've taken away from this is that there are plenty of ways for it to work out, but being realistic from the get-go is just so important, because if your base line of attack is being realistic, you can only go up from there then. You know, either it's going to go the realistic way and you're ready for it, or your game might absolutely explode and you are going to be happy. But being realistic in these situations is arguably, I would say, one of the reasons why No More Robots is in the position it is, because this kind of train of thought is what we put into every single game and how we talk to every developer we work with. Yes, apologies again, but thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Mike. No apologies necessary. Fantastic talk. No sugar, as promised. So just as a quick reminder, you can ask speakers questions at any time during the presentation. So please feel free to do that by typing them into the Q&A area. So please don't be shy. We already have a ton of questions. So we're going to move on. Up next, we have our sponsor friend, Anthony Mendoza. He is Director of Business Development at xola, and he's going to talk about how you can expand the reach of your mobile or PC game. Definitely a worthwhile subject to expand your audience. So stick around, and then you can ask Mike and Anthony your questions. We're going to get to those right after this next talk. So take it away, Anthony.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. And thank you, Mike, for the insights and the doomy conversation, yet really helpful information regarding the cost of making a video game. On that note, as Chris mentioned, my name is Anthony Mendoza, and I actually want to take this opportunity to talk to everybody on how xola can help developers and publishers launch and sustain their video game and build a viable video game business by expanding your mobile or PC game using xola. So first, in short, xola's goal and objective is to accelerate your video game commerce globally. We are here simply to help game developers grow their businesses, all while allowing them the flexibility to focus on what their true passion is, and that's making video games, all while leaving the nitty-gritty financial tracking, data tracking to xola, and basically allow you to focus 100% on your game. And here are some key points on how we've actually accomplished this over the years. As you can see, we've been in gaming industry for 16 plus years and exclusively made for video games. So this is why we position ourselves as the gaming experts in the industry when it comes to transactional and business engine related stuff. Sorry. So how does xola actually accomplish this? Well, there are 4 key strategies along with a combination of products to help you achieve this. First thing we do is we help you operate globally using our xola pay station and anti-fraud solution. This allows you to transact in 200 plus countries with the option of enabling 700 different payment methods to allow regionally specific payment methods to be available to a lesser known audience and help increase conversion. And obviously, with the increase of high transaction volume, we need to make sure that our anti-fraud solution is the #1 in the business, right? That is the bread and butter. We make sure that we are protected, and we do what we can to continue to reiterate and improve our anti-fraud solution to provide you with that, safe of mind. The second thing we help you do is obviously earn more revenue. Using the xola in-game store, buy button, site builder, and subscriptions, these products were actually built to help you earn more revenue and allow publishers and developers to monetize the gaming experience across all platforms. Third thing we do is we help you grow your community using the xola login, launcher, and xola partner network products. The main objective of using these products is simple. It's to acquire new users who launch and play video games with a single sign-on. And then lastly, of course, all of this needs to be capped off with the ability to integrate really easily. So using our xola SDK with Unity Unreal helps you integrate these payments and management tools for any and all games that you're building or looking to scale up effectively. So again, now how does this actually work? What is xola? How do these engines work together? So xola contains 2 different engines working together synchronously. The xola transactional engine houses all transactional and cloud-based products that allow you to monetize your game. So think of the xola Pay Station, the xola Site Builder, and the xola Partner Network programs that allow you to bring and make money. But then there's also the xola Business Engine perspective, which is basically our xola Publisher account. And here in the xola Publisher account is where you control everything. Not only the project settings and not only payment methods enabling, but also to be able to see analytics, right? See what kind of traffic's coming to your game and from where. Also to see what most popular payment methods that are, right? So maybe you can start honing marketing efforts around them, right? And being able to drive traffic to these lesser known payment methods that are actually capturing an audience that otherwise would be overlooked from the conventional payment methods like PayPal and credits. So these are our 2 engines that help us actually accomplish the help that we are trying to provide for publishers and developers. And so we have extensive experience with some very well-known global clients, as you see. I myself have been lucky enough to be a part of a lot of these integrations. So I have been able to personally see what kind of value adds we add as a company to not only enterprise companies, but also mid-tier and startup and indie startups. So we've definitely seen our share of success, and we're very eager to show the community exactly what we can do and what we've done for partners. And as you can see, there's a wide range of global clients from PC games to mobile games as well. Whoops, did I skip one? Nope. Okay, perfect. So now the reason why I'm here, and it's basically to show you exactly and to review the mobile and PC game developer challenges we've been experiencing, and we've been talking to developers and publishers about their troubles and how xola is positioned to actually help them. So a couple of challenges we've actually experienced is, one, discoverability for your game is challenging and restricted on platforms that are agnostic to Apple and Android. It's hard to get discovered without paying money upfront, and it's hard to actually get on top featured lists without some sort of in. And so discoverability at best is very, very challenging to be exposed in these platforms. Second is accessing player data and information. Similar to the discoverability issues, the dependence on these platforms make it extremely hard to get player data and information, at least enough to build marketing campaigns around, to connect directly to your audience, right? Especially given the new Apple IDFA rules, there could be a little bit more of restriction and harder to get access to this kind of information that really allows you to hone marketing efforts in order to build your game and scale your game up. So there's a lot of restriction regarding discoverability and the ability to get player data and information. Along with these two, the other thing we realize is the lack of control of user experience, right? You're restricted to a certain UI or UX. You're restricted to payment methods, allowing you the inability to actually personalize the user experience, allowing you to better connect with your audience. And that's non-existent in these platforms. And it's something that mobile and PC game developers are eagerly trying to resolve on their own without having to depend on these third-party platforms. And then obviously everything ties back to money. And the declining profit margins is a big thing. 30% cut on these platforms takes a very big dent, makes a very big dent in your budgeting and your forecasting, and ultimately in your wallet when it comes to developing games. And as Mike mentioned, it's pretty costly, right? So any bit of savings or any bit of percentage shaving is super critical to the development of your game and ultimately the lifespan of it, right? Cool. And so here we are. Now, how we actually help overcome these challenges. What does xola actually do? What products actually resolve these issues and these challenges that PC and mobile game developers are experiencing? Well, first thing xola recommends you doing is actually creating an online destination using our xola site builder and buy buttons, which simply is a standalone page that allows you, if you're a PC game, to sell keys directly from there. You can either sell one package of keys or up to 5 different packages of keys, incentivizing users to pay and buy each one using exclusive content, using exclusive, access into certain parts of your game, any incentive that you potentially have and you can monetize for, you can actually build onto the site builder page and offer it as a purchase SKU for your users. Additionally, for mobile games, we are able to do top-up pages in the sense of, you can actually integrate virtual currencies and virtual items directly on the site on this page, sell for your mobile game, allowing your users to basically buy and purchase anything from anywhere using their mobile phone, going directly to this URL and making purchases there. Eventually, we're going to be able to allow you the ability to cross-entitle these accounts and these purchases, so top-ups work seamlessly across platforms. So please be on the lookout for that. The other thing that we do is obviously we gain those profit margins for this game. So using the xola site builder and buy button and login, you actually start driving traffic to these online destinations without dedicating 30% to these platform fees, right? xola is giving you the ability to use 700 different payment methods. And of course, these payment methods come with additional costs and what have you, but xola enables you the ability to turn off and turn on some of these payment methods. So budgeting is really, really a sticking point, which I would imagine it is. You can really become cost effective using xola, right? Being able to, offer X amount of payment methods that are less than a certain percentage that you're willing to spend certainly gives you the ability to control your profit margins and save upwards to 20% on in-app or platform fees when you're building this online store. And obviously, this goes without saying, the name of our game is payments and the ability to expand your reach globally in new geographies and across new users, right? So on this online destination, integrating xola Pay Station and anti-fraud is critical to reaching these markets because this is where our 700 plus payment methods are stored, right? These are where these recognizable payment methods are viewed by the user and the customer, allowing them to see a recognizable brand that otherwise won't be available from the conventional third-party platforms that likely will increase conversion on them actually purchasing and buying what it is that you're offering. And we've seen this across many different partners that opening up alternative payment methods does actually do this. It does increase conversion. It obviously increases audience and broadens your game and your marketing campaigns in an effort that really helps you capture that audience that otherwise would be overlooked from the standard payment method. And then just quickly, here are some of the partners that actually expanded their mobile games online. And I know I mentioned this briefly about being able to, give virtual currency subscriptions and things of that related to your mobile game commerce directly on the site. But we actually have 2 examples here with Nexters and NetEase, who've recently, Nexters increased their revenue by 20% and reached new markets using like Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, improving conversion along the way. And that was the big thing that they asked us. They wanted us to obviously expand the market and make their game a little bit more globally recognizable, but they also wanted to increase conversion. And to my point earlier, this is exactly what happened with them, opening up alternative payment methods in Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, up the conversion rate, and thus they saw a pretty significant return. And then my second example with NetEase is, they've reached new markets in South Korea and being able to kind of capture a whole new audience. And along with that, and enabling the South Korean market, they took to Kakao Pay, Toss, and gift cards, and also launched them along with the South Korean Korea market, and were able to see a pretty decent return off of that as well too. And they started using marketing efforts to drive traffic directly onto that site and get people talking and engaging a little bit more with their community. And so, you know, in a nutshell, this is really what xola does. And it really is the tip of the iceberg as far as expanding your game to mobile and PC using xola. We have other products that are not only in the pipeline, but also currently working, you know, standalone launcher, like I mentioned, the site builder and login. And eventually we're getting to the point where we're going to support esports and we're supporting physical goods. And we're going to continue to reiterate not only the existing products like our anti-fraud and pay station, but also our mobile game commerce, allowing you to kind of plug in xola seamlessly to whatever monetization strategy you may be offering to your audience. We at xola understand that not every monetization strategy is the same, and so we as a company collectively work to make sure that we cover all monetization strategies for the whole video game industry and be able to provide products and solutions that really capture the need to make a game sustainable, to allow you to build a game without the worry of taxing or integrating you know, different tax rates for different countries or different states, as we have different digital sales tax here in California, or in the United States rather. And that gives us xola the ability to help you get into these markets and take care of these taxes and take care of these, you know, these tax rates and the integration, so you don't have to worry about that nitty-gritty stuff. You can focus in on making the game. So that's quickly what xola has to offer. I'm happy to answer any and all questions. As I mentioned, I've had a lot of experience with a lot of our global clients, and I believe that I could actually be of use to some of you. So please feel free to email us at business@xola.com, or, you know, if you have a question for me, we're happy to take some Q&As over the next 10 minutes and happy to talk a little bit more in depth with this. So thank you guys for your time. And again, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Matt, for Mike for the talk earlier. So off to you, Chris.
Great. All right. Thanks so much, Anthony. Really appreciate that. Now we're going to try to get as many questions in as possible. Anthony and Mike, if you have any input, this isn't directed towards anyone specific. If you have something to say on the question, please go for it. So just a quick reminder to fill out the webcast survey. Let us know how we're doing. Now, onto the Q&A portion. As a reminder, you can put questions into the box, but we have a crap load. We're going to try to get through all of them. And if we can't, we're going to, you'll be able to ask our speakers offline, so to speak. So let's get started here. Here's the first one that is coming up. What have you learned the most from working with indie devs as a publisher? What are common mistakes most devs are making? We can start with Mike, and then Anthony, if you have something to add there.
I mean, I guess the answer to this question is pretty much everything I just talked about, isn't it? Really, it's that, especially when it's a new team, the number one thing to understand is there are so many things that you sort of don't know yet, and I don't mean that in a you don't know it yet, so why don't you shut up sort of way. I mean it in a it's going to take some time. It takes everybody a bit of time to get to the point where you have all the information and you know everything, and so there'll be a lot of assumptions you first make that are incorrect. When I started No More Robots 4 years ago, there were so many assumptions I made that were incorrect, and I had to learn over these 4 years. So even when you've been doing it for a while, you're still getting plenty of things wrong. I guess the main thing to do is try to watch as many talks like this, is the truth. You know, there's plenty that Gamasutra have done and GDC, etc., that have a lot of the answers to stuff that you may not know. And a lot of the time you can just ask people who have done it, like me. Be really cheeky, ask, and see if they'll give you some answers.
Great. Anthony, any? I'll give you a chance to answer if working with your clients.
For sure. I mean, I feel the same with Mike, right? Joining the talks like these, really doing your research with other people in the industry, networking. Obviously, pandemic kind of put a pause to Insight networking events, but those are really critical. Help is out there, right? You can use resources like Mike and our experience that let you know what it is that we've exactly seen and what your game is and what types of different integrations and different strategies that maybe we can potentially lend to you. Just quickly for me, the big thing that I've noticed is the fact that a lot of payments related stuff, as far as tax related, merchant of record related, is really, really nitty gritty and really, really daunting. And likely, as I've seen, indie developers and publishers are a little weary about expanding to new markets simply because of that. And that's something where I know when I'm talking to some of my clients or prospective clients, that's the biggest need for us. And being able to help in that sense, I think will bring a little bit more of ease and comfort to the developers, knowing that they are not making that mistake and being ill-informed or misinformed about a certain topic or strategy. So yeah, let's send my thoughts on it.
Cool. Thank you. Moving on to the next one, Mike, you got a bunch of questions about the $30,000 salary point.
I thought I might. Yeah.
So, I'll just choose one of them. There are a handful of them. The charts are based on a $30,000 annual salary. Our studios completely hosed if they live in an era that requires a higher salary for cost of living.
Absolutely, yes. It's a tricky one. Basically, in the UK, in the UK, we have this back and forth. I say we, I mean me versus the rest of the world. Between do you live in London and do you not live in London? I live in Manchester, and even Manchester is a little bit pricey. But I do not understand how some studios make games in London. London is like, I don't know what the equivalent in the US is. Let's say like San Francisco. In terms of how much that area costs compared to the rest of the country. I do want to say that I see more studios struggling in those areas, and obviously if the average salary is 60K, if it's 80K in the area you are, then of course I don't know how that conversation looks. Is the truth. I don't know what the solution is. I'm not telling you move away, but it's certainly more difficult, and on the opposite end of that spectrum, we see studios from other countries. We've worked with studios in countries where the average salary is so much lower, just because of currency differences. And in those countries, the downside for them is that they find it more difficult to, get Western press, etc., to talk about their games, and maybe they need a publisher more because of that. But also, they don't need as big of a hit to sustain their studio. So yeah, when I was coming up with this 30,000 salary, it was very much a giant asterisk next to that of lots of places in the US. But it definitely wildly varies. Yeah.
All right. We'll take another one here. What would you think it would be? What would be the best platform to release that quote unquote first small game that you recommend right now between all console platforms and Steam? And maybe this is something that both of you can weigh in on.
Yeah, from my perspective. Oh, sorry. You go ahead, Anthony. You go. I've talked too much.
Well, when we talk to developers, we never advise against going on Steam. Go on the conventional Steam and Epic game, right? I mean, those are the marketplaces that have discoverability one way or another. Even though it might not be that good, still joining this big marketplace is the best way to go. However, from our position, it's about monetizing that, right? So using the xola site builder, you can actually sell Steam and Epic game store keys directly from this online destination. So going straight to Steam and going Epic, at least from our perspective, is the advisable route. And Mike, please, if you have any thoughts on that, piggyback on them.
Yeah, I mean, part of the answer to this is what are you most comfortable with, because there's some people who have backgrounds in mobile and they know how the mobile stores work. They know the best ways to sell on there. So for some people, it makes most sense to begin with the App Store, Google Play, the millions of Android stores that there are now. For other people, Steam is the way, The good thing with Steam in particular is that it is extremely first-time developer friendly. It's really not that hard to set up a developer account on Steam and manage to work your way through the Steam backend, etc. There are arguably other platform backends which are much more difficult to navigate, and Steam arguably is one of the easier ones. The other thing as well is that if you are thinking, oh, my first game, it's a console game, that's fine. Console is a bit more tricky just for so many. I could do an entire talk on that kind of thing, but there's just a lot of reasons why console is difficult as this is my first ever platform. So I would probably say that Steam or mobile are the best ones to hit as a first time.
All right, moving on. I'm going to try to get as many as possible. Would you recommend new development studios to snowball/ramp up their titles, then from small to larger and larger titles /dev teams? So question about scaling. We had a couple of those, by the way.
So I guess say start with a smaller team making smaller games and ramp up to bigger teams making bigger games. Was that what it was?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
probably
okay.
Don't want to start with a giant studio. And then
yeah. I mean, yes. From my perspective, there are plenty of examples out there where studios came along and with their first game they made some big epic and it worked out amazingly for them. And for those people, that is amazing and all power to them. Unfortunately, they are the 0.1% of people making games. The truth is that for the vast majority, it is better to start small. The other thing as well that's always funny to me is that you'll always get people saying, yeah, but this studio made this massive game and look how amazing it did for them. And you say to that person, you do realize that studio put out 7 games before this game, right, that you never heard of, because those games were just never massive or hugely successful. There's so many examples of that where a massive game was preceded by half a dozen games that you've never heard of, because those studios, as I mentioned, were learning their craft. They were learning how video games work. They were learning all the ins and outs. They were learning to work together so that they could make this giant epic eventually. So yes, I would say for the vast majority of people, starting small and building up over years is definitely the best idea,
yeah. So we can go over just slightly. I just got word of that. So Akira Sipes, this is something that you both can comment on, I think. Says, I wish you could hear me clap from the other side of the pond. That's very nice. When you deal with games being developed in countries with a positive cost differential like India or Argentina, is your approach to cost versus earnings the same, or do you adjust for the lower cost of the of developing in that country?
Yeah, I partially touched on this, but it's obviously the case that in certain countries and certain places around the world, the cost of living is just lower there. I've worked previously on games that were made in places like Ukraine and Russia, in places where those studios, they made their games and the games came out and the games did decently, did what for somewhere else might have been this will carry us for a little while. But for those guys, they became like Russian millionaires, you know, because the cost differential is so different. So yeah, that's certainly something you could take into account. You know, even now there's a couple of studios we're working with where arguably this is the case, where they're from areas in the world where it does cost less. That is certainly something to work into these formulas when you're looking at them. If it is the case that the average salary is just lower, it's just naturally lower, then, you know, I guess at the end of the day, the sales aren't going to change. I guess is the big difference here. If you are doing the same as everyone else, and especially if you've got sort of a Western publisher helping you, or whatever, you can potentially get as many sales as any other studio in the whole world. You know, so that can certainly be in your favor. Yeah.
And we certainly advise that when we're onboarding clients and prospective partners that are looking to scale in their game in these countries like Russia and Argentina, we advise them to use the our regional pricing, not only to make sure that it counts towards the market value of the actual product in that specific country, but also increase conversion. Allowing more people to purchase your game. And in Russia, it could be, a $50 game could be the equivalent of, $250, which people are not going to purchase. But, having the insights of how to regionally price the right way in these regions will allow you to kind of offset that, right? And be able to to capture that audience in the right way. So, that's how we advise our clients who are looking to go into these territories as well too. But then there's a lot of technical integrations that go involved with there too, because we obviously don't want to give out keys or let's just say US key for the price of a Russian key, right? So we have different mitigation processes in place that don't allow for purchases cross region to protect you from that. So yes, we advise to regionally price in the same way as mentioned.
Great. Another question. How much can discounts and sales mitigate a poor first month of sales? Always an interesting question there.
That is an interesting question. Yes, they can do. I think a point to make on this sort of question direction, don't know what I'm trying to say there, is what I see a lot of studios doing is if they do have arguably a poor launch, I see a lot of studios giving up. And it's tricky because the truth is that sometimes it is possible to save a game, if you want to put it that way. And I think we've seen a lot of examples of that recently. How many games have we seen where a game's been out for a while and then some streamer play? Among Us, of course, is the big example. That game, I don't know how many years that game had been out for, and all of a sudden, not a single person in this world has not heard of that game. There are plenty of things that you can do once your game has come out and perhaps not done as well as you would have hoped. And I think a lot of the developers we work with actually have come to me a year or 2 years later and said that they were surprised at what a long tail we've ended up creating for their games, because from my perspective, once we have a game like in our roster and it's out, we can continuously be doing stuff with that. We can be continuously putting in sales. We can be putting it in spotlights here, there, and everywhere. We could be putting it in bundles, in subscription services. Once you have a game out, there's so many things you can do with it. And unfortunately, if after a launch you give up on it and you just let it go, you cross a point of no return there, where if you give up on it too much, it's gone at that point, and there is no way you can bring it back. It's difficult because if you bring a game out, you spent all this time on it and it doesn't do great, you feel like crap, don't you? So what can you do? But yeah, I think that's probably one of the hardest things, really.
Definitely not sugar-coated. This one. All right. I think I have time to do one more here, and I have to use this one because it starts out, "Dear Mr. Horrible Englishman." So I assume that this is for Mike.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I get that a lot.
Thanks for a great talk. I was wondering if you had any concrete examples of additional, the contingency examples, things that happened to you and your studio.
Yeah. So again, this kind of varies wildly, but if I just had to give you some numbers, let's talk about localization, for example. If arguably most of the time you want your game to be localized into at least a couple of languages other than English, languages that usually do quite well for us include German, Chinese, simplified Chinese. There's plenty of others we'll do as well, and it's not hard to kind of Google all the best ones. French, Japanese, Russian can do well. Sometimes there's crazy languages that can do well for you because that you would have never assumed because of just where your game gets picked up. Currently, we're localizing Let's Build a Zoo for the Thai audience because we have had a ridiculous influx of people in Thailand playing the game and being interested in it. So you can definitely sort of watch your kind of metrics and see what works there. For a small studio, and again, it depends on the number of words. Let's assume your game has, I don't know, like 20,000 to 40,000 words in it or something like that. It's possible that you'll be able to, for a couple of languages, that's going to cost you less than $10,000. Maybe a lot cheaper if you can kind of find an individual who would be interested to do that. Other costs you got to think about: licenses, engine licenses, Unity licenses, hardware you're going to need. What platforms are you going on? Because they're probably going to want a couple of thousand for this, that, and the other. Don't have to worry about age ratings anymore for most platforms, which is incredibly nice. That's saved tens of thousands of dollars, thanks to IARC. When I was giving the realistic example earlier and I had added on 20,000 for localization and additional costs, I would probably just assume 20,000 and go from there. And if it's not that much, great. But at least then you kind of kept it in mind, I would say.
All right. We went over time. We still didn't get to everybody, but it doesn't look like contact info is right there for Mike if they want to follow up with you outside of this forum.
Yes, if anybody wants to ask any, I know there was loads of questions that weren't answered. Please tweet at me. I will tweet back at you. I promise. I don't know if there's somewhere I can type my Twitter, but just tweet back at me. It's Rave of Ravendale. Just do it. I live on Twitter. Just do it.
And Anthony, contact, your email again was?
Yeah, you can just use business@xola.com and reference Anthony, or that's the easiest way for now.
Cool. And if you want to harass me on Twitter, I'm just at Chris Graft. And okay, so thanks to all of you in the audience. We had an amazing turnout. We're going to keep on bringing these kinds of free talks to you. We'll keep you posted on Gamasutra.com. Within the next 24 hours, you're going to get an email that has a link to this presentation so you can share it with people who weren't able to make it. I think that you should, because this was a particularly good session. And that's it. This webcast is copyrighted by Informa. The individual speakers are solely responsible for their content and their opinions, especially Mike's. And that's all. Thanks so much to our speakers, Mike and Anthony. And everyone have a great day.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.